Good morning, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life. I'm sorry about the lighting this morning, but it is early in the morning. It's about 7 a.m. Here, and I'm trying to get this video filmed before work so that I can have it sort of done before my day gets crazy. Trying a new technique here to try to get videos done since I'm having such a struggle to film videos in off times between work and other commitments. So I'm going to talk today about the books that I read in the second half of September. I had done really well reading in the first half of September and had done a mid-month wrap-up, which I'll link down below for those of you who haven't seen it yet. And then I slowed down a bit, but I had quite a few books on the go there for the last couple of weeks, and I did end up finishing another 4 or 5 books, I believe. So let's just get to them. The first book I want to talk about is H is for Hawk by Helen MacDonald. This is a nonfiction sort of memoir that has been all over BookTube for a while. It has been extremely popular. It's won all kinds of awards, as you can see from all these nice little stickers on my copy of the book. And I read this as a buddy read with Doris from over at Aldi Books. And we really had a good time discussing this book. It's very well written. The prose is quite beautiful in places. Helen MacDonald really does a nice job writing about nature and specifically birds, and also about her grief and dealing with her grief after the death of her father, which is sort of what this book, the premise of this book is, you know, her father dies unexpectedly, and this is the year after that event and how she deals with that. And one of the things that she does during that year is she trains a goshawk. And I knew absolutely nothing about training birds, so that all was very interesting. MacDonald writes about the bird training in a very interesting and engaging manner. However, one problem that I did have with this book is interspersed in between all of the beautiful writing about bird training and her dealing with the grief of the loss of her father. She brings in information about T.H. White, who also wrote a book called The Goshawk and was into bird training and is the author of the famous book The Once and Future King. Sorry, I wanted to call it The Sword and the Stone, but that's the Disney version of that book. And good old T.H. White caused quite a problem for Doris and I as we read this book. I think it's fair to say that neither one of us was particularly fond of good old T.H. by the end of this. And it sort of took away some of my enjoyment of the book, the sections that were about him. I started out actually finding it quite interesting in the beginning, learning more about him, because I was interested in the book, The Once and Future King, because I had loved The Sword and the Stone as a kid and had always thought I wanted to read that book. But after learning more about good old T.H. In this book, I'm probably not going to be moving on to that anytime soon. So overall, a good read, an excellent experience as always, buddy reading it with Doris. But there was some problems with part of the content in this for me. The next thing I completed was an audiobook, and the audiobook was 3 Wishes by Liane Moriarty. Liane Moriarty is very, been very popular with her book, Big Little Lies, I think is the name of it. Now I've blanked. I listened to that one on audiobook too. That was my first Liane Moriarty, and I really enjoyed that one, and I've since listened to a couple others of hers on audio. And so 3 Wishes is a contemporary novel about triplet sisters in their 30s. The book starts out with them at, you're sort of getting the story from an onlooker's perspective of these 3 women in a restaurant, obviously celebrating their birthday. One of the women is pregnant, the other 2 are not. They are having a great time, and then all of a sudden they get into a fight and start screaming at one another, and one of the non-pregnant sisters throws a fork and it stabs into the pregnant sister's belly, and the ambulance has to get called, and all this stuff happens. And so you start out with the book right there, and you're like, what is going on with these 3 sisters? And the book goes back in time, and you start to piece together the story as to how they got to that scene in the restaurant. So you go through, from each of their perspectives, life as it is now, life as it was when they were teenagers and growing up through their early 20s. And it's Liane Moriarty does a great job of bringing humor into a book, but also feeding in issues of, marriage and friendship and sibling rivalry, and what do you do when your parents get divorced, and what do you do with other domestic challenges in your life, and fertility, marriage issues, drinking, all of these things. She sort of weaves together domestic issues into her stories in a humorous way, but also in a poignant way. And I find her stories to be great fun on audiobook. The same woman, I don't remember her name, I'll try to look it up and write it on the screen here, does the narration for her audiobooks, and she does a really great job. She has a great Australian accent, and I very much enjoy them on audio. The next thing I completed was another audiobook, and that is Fear, Trump in the White House by Bob Woodward. And this is a nonfiction book, and it's been all over the news. It's been extremely it's been selling extremely well since it was released a couple of weeks ago. And I have not read any of the sort of expose nonfictions that have been published about the Trump White House. I felt that they were not going to be... I was looking for a book that I could believe was done with journalistic integrity, and I think Bob Woodward has the bona fides to write a book like this. He has written a book about every U.S. president, I believe, since Nixon. He was one of the original journalists to break the story of the Watergate scandal when Nixon was president. So he has the chops. He has the journalistic chops to write a story like this and to really give us, I feel, a true look behind the scenes at the Trump presidency. And the thing that's interesting about this book is I went into it with the title being Fear, and it has that really striking, cover that you think is very, it's going after a certain look. It's trying to be, what's the word I want? It's sensational. It's sensational, the cover, I guess, is what I would say. But I found that the book itself was not written in a sensational way. I felt that Woodward was actually writing this book in a very even-handed way, and in fact at some points I was a little frustrated with him for being so... It seemed to me like he was bending over backwards to try to give Trump the benefit of the doubt, or the Trump administration, people within the administration, the benefit of the doubt. But on the other hand, he has done the research. He's talked with everyone, and he has the material to back himself up with what he's saying in this book. I believe that. And the other thing I realized was I went into it because the title is Fear. I went into it thinking it was the fear that we in the public or in the greater global community feel from a president who does not meet norms and does a lot of things outside what we would consider normal, and that causes a lot of fear within the public of what's going to happen next. But he is referring to fear as that's the technique and the tool that Trump uses in order to achieve his own ends. That is his style of management and his style of how he thinks he can sort of win at things, is if he can scare people into doing what he wants them to do, that's a good thing for him. So that was really interesting to me. I went into it thinking the title referred to one thing, and actually it referred to a different thing. Is actually referred to Trump's management style, which probably is not what you want in the leader of the free world, right? I'm just saying. So I won't say that I enjoyed the book, but I appreciated the information that I gained from the book. I don't know that I learned anything that I was completely unaware of, but I do feel like I have more, a better understanding of the reality without the sensationalized, gossipy bits that you're always hearing about on the news or through social media. The other thing I will say is I was very disturbed by the fact that the people that are working within the administration, not just Trump, but the people surrounding him and the members of Congress and everything. I'm just amazed at how little, or how, where are the adults is my question. Where are the adults in the room here? Because none of these people come out looking very good, right? I think you get better behavior and more courtesy from your average kindergartner than you do from the people who are currently working in politics in the United States. You know, people who, I don't know about you, but when I go to work, there's a certain level of professional behavior that I expect from the people that I work with. And that doesn't include, you know, like swearing at each other or calling each other names or any of that. Like, where is the professional behavior? Or, you know, stealing paperwork off each other's desks because you don't like the, you know, the decisions that are being made. Like, I'm glad on the one hand because it probably has averted some problems as far as like with foreign trade deals and foreign conflict and all of that. But on the other hand, I'm like, that's not your job, dude. You know, that's not your job. And where's the professionalism here? I'm just, it was really shocking to me, the lack of courtesy and professionalism that is displayed on a daily basis in our political system. So that's my feelings on that book. I will say that it is, for any of you that have been following the political situation and you're, you know, into that, I think this is a good book. This is a good choice. This is better than the I would say, I haven't read that book, but I would think this would be a better book to read than, say, the Omarosa book or the Comey book or any of those. I think this is a book that you can trust has been well researched and done with the best journalistic processes. The next thing I've completed was another audiobook, and it's Let's Pretend This Never Happened by Jenny Lawson. And this book has been around for quite a long time. It's been quite popular. It is a memoir / comedic essay type collection. Jenny Lawson is basically just telling stories about her life in a humorous way. She has problems with depression and anxiety, and she talks about those things in a humorous way as well. It was great fun to listen to on audiobook. It's not it's not great literature, but it is amusing. I will say that I had a long car ride, and I listened to it almost, the whole, all at one go, and it did get a little tiresome to do it. I did have to end up stopping it at points and listening to a podcast or something else, because just sometimes I find with humor, like books that are very like specifically comedic memoirs, like I just get tired of the constant sometimes I can't take that much comedy all at once. I don't know what that says about me. So I would say that I didn't find it a book that I could listen straight through to on audio. The author does read it herself, which is always a good thing, I think, with memoirs. But I did have to break it up just because I found it a little tiresome to listen to nonstop. And then the last thing I completed in the month of September is a group buddy read. This is A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. This is a reread for me, and I read it with a very large group of booktubers. One of the main organizer of which was Sean the Book Maniac, but there were a bunch of others of us, and we had a great time discussing this little short book. And I will say that I enjoyed this book the first time I read it, which was over 5 years ago, and I absolutely loved it this time around. Of course, when you read a book like this, a book of literary fiction, and you discuss it with some really astute, interesting people, you're always going to get more out of it than when you just read it by yourself, I think. And I certainly found that to be the case. So this book, if you don't know, is about a man, Tom Birkin, who's just returned from the war. I believe it's World War I. And I can't remember if it's World War I or World War II actually now. World War One, I'm pretty sure. He comes back from the war. He's suffering from what we now know as PTSD, and he takes a job uncovering a painted mural in a church in the country in England. And this is all about his interactions with other members of the community there in that small town. And the whole book takes place over one summer. And it's him coming to terms with, what he experienced in the war. It's him coming to terms with how he's going to live his life from that point on. And through the other characters, there's lots of themes that are explored. I think this book probably touches on every major theme of literature, but in such a lovely, lovely way. This book really is a lovely read. It is nothing much really happens. It's not a plot-driven book. It's really about the characters, and it's about the themes that the author is exploring, but it's just written in such a way, it's like almost on every page there is something to take away and ponder and think about for later. And I can see myself rereading this book again in the future. I think it's that kind of a book that has great things to say about the human condition and about the world we live in, and it would definitely benefit from another reread. So those are the books that I read in September, at least in the second half. I think it was a very successful reading month for me. I hope that you all read some great books in September, and I will talk to you later.